In today's video, I'm picking up where I left off in my Instagram video where I demonstrated the thumbnail and composition sketch before painting. As you can see, I have a basic sketch of a figure holding a goat, and it's ready for the first layer of paint. For this layer, I'll be using burnt umber and acrylic paint, which will be followed up by an oil paint layer all the way through till the end. So I start my wash with more water than paint, and as I cover the entire surface, I gradually increase the amount of paint versus water, especially in the areas that will have shadows or darker values. Now, after the acrylic layer dries, I'm ready to begin the next step using oils. And for this step, I'm continuing the same process of doing the wash, but just a little thicker. And I'm starting with the background just as I did with the acrylic layer. But this time I'm using a mixture of Prussian blue and Payne's gray, and that's gonna help me to get those deep and dark values that I want for the background. And moving on to the garment, I'm actually using the same Prussian blue and Payne's gray for this, but instead I'm adding some white to bring it up in value, and that way it has a really cool blend with the background. But to give it that light tone that the garment has, it stands out against the background, but it's still in that same color range of blues, just lighter. And for the skin, I'm using a mixture of burnt umber and burnt sienna. And I make sure that some of that same Prussian blue and Payne's gray is still on the brush so that it creates a full harmony within the subject and the background. And for the goat, I'm doing a similar process. There's a little bit of blue still on the brush, then I'm adding more white, and then I'm putting a little bit of the burnt sienna just to bring out some of those brownish tints that I see in the reference. And for the right side of the figure's face, I'm actually using a pigment called French Rouge Indian. It's really good. It's a really good, it kind of reminds me of burnt sienna in some ways, but just a little bit more of a rust to it. And there's also hints of purple running along the garment on the left side, which would be the figure's right. That's actually dioxazine purple. It's one of my favorite purples. I highly recommend it. I think that that's something that every painter should have in their collection of oil paints, whether it's oil or even acrylics. I believe they do have this type of paint in acrylic as well. Going deeper into the goat to really get those details that I want. You see there's a mixture of burnt sienna, white, titanium white, burnt umber for some of the areas that are a little bit deeper. It's not too much shadow on the goat, but you know, burnt sienna would really help to get some of those small touches of shadow that may be on the goat's fur. Another thing to add about the goat is, as I'm painting it, I'm doing dabs. I'm not trying to get a smooth blend with the goat, because you know you want to give that implication of hair or fur coming from the goat. So I paint with so much dashes and strokes, and you want to bring some of that fur off into the rest of the painting, such as the figure's hand or even on the figure's garment, to imply that there's actual hair that's moving or just sticking out from the goat. And as I paint this, just keep in mind how limited the palette seems to be. The majority of this painting is blue. From the background to the garment, you know, even in some areas of the skin, I've put some of that blue, and also in the goat. But it's really blues, some browns, and white. There's a hint of red for the bracelet and a hint of green for the collar around the goat's neck. But there's not too many colors that I'm using for this painting. So I can illustrate the beauty everywhere I go. Last week I saw a hawk-like creature, but its feathers were purple and the beak was so golden. Another thing I want to add is, if you take a look at the hands, notice that I didn't get too detailed with the hands. Just, you know, implied values, implied shadows where I need them, blocks, you know, rectangles for the fingers, just the certain shapes that bring out and implies fingers, wrists, you know. So the hands aren't the focal point of this painting, so there's no need to go into so much detail with the hands. And now I'm closing out the details in the face. You know, I'm adding some white for the eyes, you know, adding some of that white also into the face itself, where the brown is, just to bring out some of those lighter tones. And going into the left side of the face, which would be the figure's right, I would add some of those browns into the white as I paint it, because some of that skin underneath the face paint will be showing through. So you don't want it to be completely white, because then it will just be flat. You want it to be some type of illusion of three-dimensionality. So you would paint some of that, even burnt umbers. I would put some of the burnt umbers into the skin in certain areas, and just get like a mixture of the white, the burnt sienna, the burnt umber, even some of the rouge French Indian. And now getting those details in the clothing, I'm using mostly Prussian blue, a little bit of Payne's gray, just to get those darks in those dark lines that implies the folds of the garments going down, and just those shadow areas. Adding more purples, dioxazine purple, I'm adding more of that into the garment as it flows down to the bottom of the page. the garment has these little hairs that comes out at the end. So I'm gonna imply those by making it lighter in value, a mixture of white and Prussian blue, white and some of the dioxazine purple. It's a good mixture of those two types of pigments and those hues. And before I add all of those little dashes of fur or hair that sticks out from the garment, I would put down the darker layer that sits underneath it first. And then on top of that, you would put those dashes of lighter tones to give that illusion of something coming forward, sitting over something that's darker. And now I'm just going back into the bracelet with lighter values, a little bit lighter pink on top of what's already there. And around the areas that surround it where the wrist would be, I'll add some of that burnt umber just to give that implied shadow sitting behind the bracelet. And that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed watching. Please feel free to leave suggestions and feedbacks in the comment section. I really appreciate it. Hit the like button, subscribe, and press the bell to get notifications on new videos like this one. Links to my social media and websites are in the description. Thanks for watching.